Putting together a quote or a quick estimate can be a daunting task, but I want to show you a really quick and easy way to put those numbers together using Bluebeam and Lutron stamps. I've put together a file set. I'm going to scroll to where our electrical RCP starts, and we're going to jump to this first floor here. So what you're looking at is a typical plan where we're seeing where the switch locations are. We know where the windows are located, and we can see where our fixtures are also located on the plans. So just to give a little background, because I'm familiar with the project, I know that this area here is the garage, so we're going to leave that out. And this is an outdoor covered patio, so we're going to leave this part out of our project for now as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is start with the controls. So when we upload the tools into Bluebeam, you'll see all of these different options here on the left when we click on the tool set. So for this project, I'm going to use Elise. And everywhere that I see a control on the project, I'm going to assume that we're doing an Elise keypad. So we know that we might end up switching some of these out. They might not all be a 2-column Elise keypad, but for this quick numbers purpose, we're going to throw all of those in as an Elise. Okay, it looks like it got them all. So now I'm going to hit escape and drop that tool. Now, I also know that this is a Ketra project. So I'm going to, in my tools, find the Ketra type X, and I am going to use a square fixed D3. So now everywhere that I have a downlight, I'm going to stamp out a Ketra fixture. Okay, so you may have noticed that I skipped this fixture here. This looks like a dining room pendant to me. So I'm gonna guess that rather than being a downlight, we're gonna do something decorative there. So I'm gonna stamp that as an A lamp so that we can attach it to a Ketra Ready pendant fixture. And I also see that I missed this control as well. So let's go back, find Elise, and put a stamp there. Perfect. So now we've accounted for all of our interior controls and fixtures, again, leaving out these outdoor spaces. And I'm going to finish up by grabbing the measurements for all of the shades on the project. Let me find my shades here. Okay. And these are going to be palladium wired shades. So for these, it's a little bit different. You're going to click where the shade begins. You can hold the shift key to make sure you're drawing a straight line, and you're going to double click to finish the end of the shade. Now you're going to see this message pop up asking you to calibrate the measurement. So what we're going to do is input a custom scale, but we need to first find the scale on the drawing set. So here we see 1/4 of an inch is equal to 1 foot. So let's draw that out again, hit shift and click twice to drop it, and then apply a custom scale. So 1/4 of an inch and is going to equal 12 inches. Now, we don't want to put it in as feet because that will mess up the way that we pull in our shade measurements into my project. So keep everything in inches and that'll make everything easier to import. So apply that scale and we're going to keep going. I'm guessing we're going to do something over this length of doors, but I'm not exactly sure what we're going to do there for now. So I am going to that it's going to be one large shade. Same thing, we'll probably want some protection over this door. Okay, I'm going to leave these main doors out here. Not sure how that's going to work. So all of the windows and then these big doors and sliders in the back we've accounted for. So now we have our controls, our shades, and our fixtures all accounted for. I'm going to hit the escape key again to drop my tool. And when I pull up this slider here, what we're going to see is how many keypads we've stamped out. We have 34 D3s, and then it accounted for that decorative lamp. Don't mind these squares here. The architect that I'm pulling this project from just asked that I cover their information. So that's all those squares are. And then down here, we see all of our palladium shades and their widths. Obviously, this one we're going to have to split into two. That's probably the one over those back main doors. But again, just pulling some budget purposes, so no problem there. Next thing I'm going to do is export this as a CXV summary. So I usually call it my project name. So for this, I'm just going to use Bluebeam sample, and then I'm going to say that it is the Lutron RCP. Put it in the correct folder. And then this window is going to pop up. So now what we see is all of our counts for our fixtures, lamps. It marked the Elise keypad as two different locations or two different line items rather because I stamped them differently. I know that these are going to be the same. So just to make this a little easier, I'm going to delete it and make sure this line item is up to 18. And actually for the width for our non-shade items, I'm just going to delete that. It causes some confusion again when we pull those into my projects. And then everything down here, again, those are just the blocks that I use to cover the architect block. So I'm going to save this file and then I'm going to open up my projects. All right, so I've put together a new project and I'm going to click the drop down under revision and select a file to import. I'm going to select this RCP that's in a CXV file and hit open. What that's going to do is pull everything that we just stamped out and add it into my projects for us so that we don't have to do that same work twice. So I'm going to add this in as the file with Ketra controls and shades. And you'll notice that we have a failure in two of these areas. For whatever reason, I have some difficulty when I'm pulling in a CXV that has the A20 lamps on it. So I'm just going to say, or go in and add one Ketra A lamp once I import everything else into my projects. And again, because that roller shade for that really wide palladium is super wide and not compatible, I'm going to have to go in and manually add that too. But everything else is going to drop in for us. So we're going to select import. And again, I'm going to go in and add an A20 from the file line that did not get added. And I'm also going to add a palladium shade. I'm just going to assume that we're going to break the palladium shade into 2 parts to accommodate that large width. Again, we know that we might end up pulling more panels for that. So we had 192. So I'm just going to make each of those 96 inches. Standard height. I'm going to save it because I don't necessarily care what the fabric is at this point. I just need to put a placeholder in for a budget. So obviously doesn't include any of our panel equipment. With Ketra, we know we're going to have a really nice, neat panel since we're using all the digital fixtures. But now you can see if I had to give a really quick quote, I'm looking at my pricing. I can add whatever margin I want to add on those fixtures using that cost plus strategy that Zach and James have been teaching everyone about. But really helpful, super quick. You can see I did the whole thing in about 10 minutes. So hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully you'll be able to adopt this method. Give it a try. If you don't have a Bluebeam subscription, it's, I think, 30-day free trial. So worthwhile giving it a shot, see what works for you. Everybody's a little different, but this is what I use to put together a really quick quote and count of what I need on a project. So using the exact same plans, I've left my controls and shades, but I'm going to switch away from a Lutron fixture and show how we would mark this up as if it were a third-party fixture with HomeWorks. So what we need to do is count up how many zones we have. That's going to tell us how many modules we need to control that third-party fixture. So leaving a lease again, because we know that's what's going to end up on the project, we're just going to stamp for zones. So you'll see I'm going to trace each zone. So I see right here, this switch is controlling this outdoor light. But then here, this fixture is controlled in 2 locations. I'm just counting zones, so I'm only going to count that once. This takes a little bit longer, but it's really helpful to put together a quick count of how many modules we're going to end up needing based on how many zones we have. Just kind of trace around to make sure I have that zone accounted for only one time. So here, this one, I'm not seeing what it's attached to, so I'm going to count it just to be safe. Okay, so I think I got all of these zones accounted for. Again, for this exercise, I'm strictly looking at the interior spaces, right? Leaving out the garage, leaving out the outdoor area in the patio. So I'm going to hit escape to drop my tool. And again, when we slide this bar up, it's going to show us how many zones we have stamped with our Maestro, how many keypads, and all of our shades. So I'm going to move this into an Excel file, and I'm going to call this zone count, controls, and shades. When this opens up in a Excel file, last time we saw that when I was stamping out my Elise keypad, I dropped the tool and then picked it back up where I missed one. So I'm just going to consolidate these 2 line items. 18 keypads in total. And then we have 19 Maestros. Again, that to us just tells us that we have 19 zones of light. This width, I delete this option here. Same for height. I've noticed that sometimes it just confuses the import process into my projects. And these placeholders down here, again, are just the blank blocks that I use to cover the architect information. So I'm going to save this file and go back into that same My Projects file that we worked in previously where we showed Ketra controls and shades. So I'm going to select this import option to create a new file. And I'm going to open up the file with the zone count controls and shades. Okay, so just like last time, we know that the reason that we're getting an error here is because the width was too wide. So I'm just going to add this zone name or revision name as zones, controls, and shades. And then I'm going to make sure that I go in first thing and add that palladium shade that got dropped. For that quick budget purpose, I'm just going to split that amount into two separate shades and add in a standard height. Move it over to a palladium wired, and then just leave the fabric as is, because right now, again, all we're looking to do is put together some quick bill of material and numbers. All right, so let's go back to these maestros that we stamped out. Again, the reason that we used Maestro was just so we had something that would count for us as we walked through the project. With HomeWorks, we're going to use a module rather than all of these dimmers and switches. So I'm going to go in to my panels and modules, in my DIN modules, and I'm going to get a 4A5. Now, if we have 19 maestros, 19 zones, that means that we need 5 modules. So I'm going to adjust the quantity to 5. Again, those 5 modules will allow for 20 zones. We have 19, so we'll have 1 extra. And then I'm going to delete this line item because, again, all it was a placeholder for us. So now what we've done is put together a really quick count of how many controls we need, a quick measurement of the shades, and then get us started with how many modules that we'll need to control that third-party fixture. Once we have all of this information, obviously I'm missing power supplies and other components, but it allows us to start having that conversation about why we might be able to offer a better solution with Lutron's intelligent lighting strategy for a more competitive cost using less space rather than moving over to a third-party fixture. So hopefully this is something that you guys can give a try. You can see how easy it was to do. And then when I put those into those same My Projects file, I'm able to really easily move back and forth between the two as I'm working up the rest of my bill of materials.